talking about reflections of a city council member. Sue grew up in New York and Washington, D.C. and earned her BA and master's degrees from the University of Maryland. She began her political involvement by volunteering on Lyndon Johnson's presidential campaign before she was eligible to vote. After moving to Minnesota in the 1970s, she attended William Mitchell College of Law and began her career as an employment labor attorney at General Mills. She also resumed her political activities, working on several state and local candidates' campaigns and serving as a member of several St. Louis Park boards and commissions. In 1995, she was appointed to fill a midterm vacancy on the St. Louis Park City Council and subsequently won 6 re-election campaigns. Since 2011, she's also served as a member of the Transportation Advisory Board of the Metropolitan Council. She has also volunteered and or served as a member of the board of directors of many nonprofit organizations. Thank you, Sue, for taking time out of your day to present to us. And we'll have time for Sue to do her presentation. For questions and answers, we'll need to use the microphone. And so welcome to Sue, and thank you.
Well, thank you, Deb, and thank you to the League for inviting me to speak today. I've been on the City Council since 1995, and I'd like to share with you my reflections on 3 main topics. The first is trends that I have observed in the city since I joined the council. The second is my predictions about future trends, what we will see in the future at the city. And third is what I have learned during my service on the council. And then I'll be happy to take your questions. So here are some of my observations about the city since I've joined the council, and these are in no particular order. Well, when I first joined the council, Jeff Jacobs, who was a longtime city council member and our mayor, he would frequently state that the role of the city was, and I quote, drink, drive, and flush, to make sure that happened. Flush. He said that was what the city was responsible for doing. Well, even at the beginning of my service, I knew that was simplistic because there were many other things that the city did. We were responsible for public safety. We were responsible for zoning, for trash pickup, for inspections, and for other functions and services that, in general, related to infrastructure. But over the years, we have added more and more responsibilities for environmental protection, for neighborhood organization, for fostering connections among city residents, for public health, for social justice, and so on. In other words, we've added more functions and responsibilities that are more people-oriented. The second trend that I've noticed is that there is a lot more citizen engagement in city-related issues. It's expanded significantly. When I first joined the council, many residents in my ward got involved in just one issue, and that was the proposal for rerouting freight trains through many people's neighborhoods. Well, fortunately, we won that issue. But since then, residents have gotten more organized and more involved in a wider variety of concerns around development proposals, around water quality, around human rights, etc. And in addition, as you might imagine, I get a lot of what you might call complaints or concerns that are raised by residents. Early on, a big percentage of the concerns that were raised were about 2 issues: noise and traffic. More recently, however, those 2 issues have not gone away, but more recently, the comments and complaints have expanded to many other topics, such as home tear-downs and new construction of what some people call McMansions. I've gotten more and more requests that the city install new sidewalks, and more complaints that the city is installing new sidewalks. There is no agreement on that one. Third, there is more involvement in residents in their neighborhood organizations and events. This is a very good thing for promoting neighborhood interaction and resident cohesion. But occasionally, I have to ask myself, and I have to say, be careful what you wish for, because that same organization can also lead to opposition, organized opposition to projects that the city wants to undertake. For example, there are many development proposals which would add significantly to the city's tax base, but there is also more organized opposition to many of these projects because of the increase that they could bring for more traffic, for parking problems, and so on. Okay. Over the years, there has also been a big increase in residents who are interested in participating in the city's advisory boards and commissions, the Telecommunications Commission, the Park and Recreation Commission, and so on. In past years, when we advertised for volunteers, we would get maybe 1 or 2 dozen applicants for these openings. This past winter, when we advertised, we got 120 applicants, which is a wonderful problem to have. We have great citizen volunteers. Another trend that I have observed, over the years we have had more immigrants coming to St. Louis Park and from more different countries. And in general, it appears to me that they have been accepted into our community, but many immigrant groups are still not well represented in community decision-making processes. So moving forward, I think that the city has to figure out more, let's call them culturally appropriate ways to do outreach and to promote the involvement of immigrants in city affairs. One thing that has surprised me over the last years is that very few residents express their concerns about city financial issues. Over the years, whenever we have a public hearing about raising property taxes, almost nobody shows up. And those few people that do, they make a point of saying that they are on fixed incomes and they just simply can't afford to pay increased property taxes. But they do not ever say that the city is wasting their tax money. When we have a hearing to issue millions of dollars of new bonds, which of course the taxpayers will have to repay, nobody shows up. And in fact, residents have asked me many times to please increase their property taxes so that the city would provide more services. So I have concluded that people trust our city government to be good stewards of their tax money. Going forward, it seems obvious to me many things, one of which is that both the federal government and the state government seem to be trying to cut their own services that they provide and to push responsibility for city services down to the local level. But they don't seem to be interested in providing more funding that would actually allow us to provide those same services. Imagine that. So, for example, right now, the state legislature is proposing to cut Metro transit services by 40%. But people will still need to get around, and our economy depends on people being able to get around to jobs, to school, to medical care, and so on. So this may well lead to the city needing to provide new services. Who knows? Maybe we'd have to provide some sort of bus service. Maybe there are other services we will also have to consider adopting. We don't know, nor do we know how we might pay for them, but the only way we can pay for services is raising property taxes. But raising property taxes, in my view, would be a problem because property taxes are regressive. Property taxes would be more fair, or it would be more fair and more progressive to raise income taxes, which the city can't do, but the state can do and the federal government can do, but I do not see any appetite for the federal or state government to do that. It's also problematic to have to continually raise property taxes. At some point, residents will balk at paying increased property taxes. Another and related trend that I anticipate is that the state or federal governments may try to prevent cities from tackling certain problems or issues, even though the state or federal government refused to tackle them themselves. For example, look at the current efforts in our state legislature to try to prevent Minneapolis and St. Paul from raising the minimum wage. I presume that the governments will also try to minimize local control on other hot button issues as well. As a result of these upcoming financial squeezes, I expect that cities will need to band together to address common issues even more than we do today. For example, today St. Louis Park and several other cities back each other up to provide firefighting services. So if there is a big fire, crews will come from other communities to help put it out. This allows each city to hire fewer firefighters and to purchase fewer trucks and other equipment. But perhaps there would be even more financial efficiency if we combined into one fire department, and there might be less total administrative costs. We don't know, we would have to study that. But I believe we will need to look at this and other possible options for consolidation as well. We will also, we may also need to provide more services jointly with other neighboring communities for services that were formerly done at a state or federal level, but that can be appropriately delivered on a larger geographic and population basis than just one city. I believe that going forward we will need to have a lot more emphasis on energy and water conservation. St. Louis Park seems to have a lot of residents who are clearly committed to doing whatever we can to mitigate the impacts of climate change. And to become more energy efficient is, in my view, mandatory. The city is currently doing the research to prepare what we call a climate action plan. And when it is completed, we will have a blueprint for actions that the city, residents, and businesses can take to reduce our energy usage. Excuse me. Over time, we may also have to consider incentives to promote energy efficiency and or penalize those who are wasteful. And the same is true for water. We will need to find more ways to minimize water waste and more ways to reuse gray water, etc. Our St. Louis Park population is aging. Older people are and will become an increasing bigger share of our population. So we will need to adapt our services accordingly to help seniors age in place. For example, one that I have been promoting for a long time is that the city should plow the snow from the sidewalks, which are owned by the city. and many of which are already plowed by the city, but not all. And in part because a growing share of our community simply can't physically do it. Finally, St. Louis Park and other cities are going to have to do more to address the great and growing divide between the haves and the have-nots in our society, okay, and to try to address the shrinking of the middle class. This has huge implications for taxes, for law enforcement, for civic engagement, for relationships among residents, for human rights, and so on. Now, much of the root causes of this economic divide are out of the control of city government. But nevertheless, the impacts are felt locally, and I believe that these impacts will grow over time. Our city government and our school district are going to have to find ways to cope as best as we can, and hopefully we can address these challenges in ways that are constructive and not just whatever happens to be politically correct at the moment. I'm not sure what concrete steps exactly we will be able to take, but if we can't act effectively, I am actually very afraid that our communities will see major civil disruption. So, what have I learned during my 22 and growing number of years on the council? Many things, including, first of all, I've learned how the city actually functions. Who is responsible for what? Who has to be sold, so to speak, on a new idea before that idea can be acted upon? What entities have to grant approvals for what kind of projects, and so on. I've learned how decision-making actually works, which is not the same as what we teach kids in civics class. For example, how does it happen that a particular building with particular features and particular design and size gets built in a particular place? I've learned about that. Zoning issues. How is it decided, how was it decided, and by whom, how Highway 100 was finally rebuilt? Finally. Yes. How was it built? How was it decided what the design would be for Highway 100 rebuilt? How does it happen that there is a stop sign on one corner, but not a stop sign on another corner? It's been interesting and fascinating to me to learn more about traffic engineering, about building codes, and things that previously I really didn't know anything about. I've learned a lot about those kind of things on the City Council. I've learned that our city actually operates quite efficiently with very competent staff and with a reasonably good ear for what are the desires of our residents. We certainly are not perfect, but I think that St. Louis Park has managed to avoid many of the traps and problems that land other communities in trouble and on the front pages. Now, it's not magic. It takes a lot of planning, a lot of data collection, a lot of soliciting input from residents and from experts, all of which, of course, will slow down the decision-making process. It also takes a city council that is willing to confront issues, to think long-term, to make good policy decisions, excuse me, not to grandstand for personal agendas, and not to micromanage the city staff who are charged with implementing these policy decisions. I've learned that very few residents seem to understand what powers a city does and does not have. They don't understand that some decisions are not made by the city, but instead by the county, by the state, or by the federal government. Frankly, many residents have gotten very frustrated with me when I tell them that no, the city has no power to make those noisy planes stop flying overhead. Or the city has no power to make the railroad stop blowing its horn at 3 a.m. And these residents, frankly, are not particularly interested in hearing a lesson on what level of government can address which type of issue. They just want me to wave my magic wand and make that problem disappear, and I can't. I've learned that many residents are quite respectful and appreciative of city council members. Contrary to the stereotype that people just complain, I have found that many residents go out of their way to compliment the city and to compliment me personally sometimes about what they consider to be positive accomplishments. Many residents, as I mentioned earlier, are speaking up more and more on issues of importance to them. And to the extent they do contact me, residents seem to really appreciate the services that the city provides. But not everyone. Many residents in my ward have never contacted me, they have never participated in neighborhood events, they have never shown up at a city council meeting. So for many residents, I have no idea what they think is good or bad in St. Louis Park. And of course, I have encountered some residents who were rude, disrespectful, and even threatening to me. Excuse me. And then there are the residents who don't speak up, don't communicate what their perspectives are on an issue. And then after the decision is made, they scream at me about it. I find that very frustrating. I've learned that being a city council member is a lot of work, much of which is not visible to the community. I spend at least several hours, maybe 4 or 5 or 6 hours every week reviewing staff reports and preparing for our Monday meetings. I attend neighborhood meetings, I attend meetings with city staff about upcoming issues, I attend meetings with developers or other individuals who request these meetings, and so on. I respond to numerous emails and numerous phone calls. Typically, this totals 15 to 20 hours a week, maybe even more. Now, in addition to that, I and many of the city council members also represent the city on other boards or commissions. For example, as Deb mentioned, I am a member of the Transportation Advisory Board, which is part of Metropolitan Council. Now, I'm not complaining. The reason I'm telling you about this time commitment is in case you are interested in running for elective office. You should know what you're getting into. And that brings me to my last point. As you may know, I recently announced that I will not run for re-election this November. Now, once I made this decision, I started trying to find a qualified woman to run. I've contacted many women in the ward, and so far, I have not been successful in finding anyone who's willing to run. So I'd like to encourage each of you to think about running for office someday, whether it's city council or something else. And if you don't want to do that, or in addition to that, I would like to encourage you to help other women successfully campaign for a political office. I have learned firsthand that we need, we need women in office with our own perspectives and our own life experiences, but not enough women seem willing to run. And in my view, our society depends on our capacity to improve women's representation in elective and other leadership positions. So with that, I'm open for questions.
You mentioned that there was an increase in citizen volunteers, and I'm wondering, are they mostly retired, or what is the age, ages of volunteers that are coming
We have people volunteering who are teenagers, we have people volunteering who are retired, and everywhere in between. It is wonderful. I should note, by the way, on our boards and commissions, we also seek youth representatives, high school students, to most of the boards and commissions, and we will be shortly announcing that we are taking applications for teenagers as well.
What roles do they take?
What role? Well, it depends on the commission. The teenagers have voting rights, and in some they do not. But what we hope is that they will bring a youth perspective to the decisions that each commission makes. Each commission is charged with looking at issues that are specific to that commission and then making recommendations to the city council.
In the Sun paper, the last article, we were discussing that earlier about your objections about parking and traffic at the McGarvey site. Yes. And they were place, and it was, you were so good. I mean, that was so reasonable, and yet, was there a deadline or something? How come it was 5 to 1 or 6 to 1? I'm not sure what the number is. It was so reasonable, your objection.
Well, thank you. I think you're going to have to ask the other city council members why they supported this plan. My overall perspective is that I think that the other city council members were focused much more on what they perceived to be the merits of the proposal itself, and they did not seem to me to be focused on the impacts of this proposal on the wider community around the project. And yes, there was a timing issue.
Wasn't it discussed again and again and again at the council meeting? Weren't there several votes on it before this final?
Yes, the place project has been discussed by the city council at many meetings over the last several years. The project has changed over time, and so the discussions therefore changed over time as well.
So I guess since this project has been going for quite a long time, and you say that there's a change from not looking at the bigger picture for projects like this, are you saying that the council has changed significantly so that their focus is different over the years? Did this start out differently when you first started on council than what it is now?
Are you speaking just of the place project or projects in general?
No, just project in general and their focus.
Oh, yes, in the last several years we have received more proposals for projects that are apartment buildings. Most of them are apartment buildings with first floor retail and several floors of apartments above them. In earlier years on the council, we did not have very many projects like that. And then, of course, during the economic recession, nobody was building for several years. I don't want to put words in the mouth of my fellow council members, so my comments were specific to the place project. Each project does have to be taken on its own merits.
I have a question. What do you think about the proposed changes in the Met Council?
I think that the idea of asking elected city and county officials to also serve as Metropolitan Council members presents numerous conflicts of interest for members, and I much prefer having appointed city council, appointed Metropolitan Council members who are not elected officials. So that Metropolitan Council members would not be running for office, and hopefully will be able to make good policy decisions that are in the best interest of the entire region, not just the best interest of their particular home community.
I have another question, Sue, and it's about tax increment financing. It seems like there's a lot of that going on these days, which of course does cost the residents of St. Louis Park a lot more than it maybe should, in my view. So is there a shift in thinking on the on the city council that they think so many years should be given away to businesses that are, to projects that are starting up? Because I'm bothered by all the tax increment financing.
I'm bothered by all the tax increment financing as well. I think we do need to do some, but we are ramping it up recently. I don't know that I would say there's a shift in the council on it so much as rather we are getting more proposals from more developers that to one degree or another may meet the criteria for tax increment financing. I will also say that even though the amount of tax increment financing that St. Louis Park is doing does seem to be increasing, the amount that we are doing is still small relative to many other communities in the metropolitan area.
Sue, I have a question. How much time each year do you think that you spend related to city council events and the meetings and everything else?
Well, on average, 15 to 20 hours a week, so multiply that out. And I will also say that if there is a big controversy, that number goes up. For example, while we were dealing with the whole potential freight rail reroute, all bets were off. I spent a lot more time with a lot more people in meetings and responding to people who were very angry.
Sue, recently you shared with me about a constituent who was angry because the council had agreed to allow a retail establishment in St. Louis Park that disagreed with her political views. And I wonder if you could tell us what you do look at when you are making a decision whether a particular establishment may come in or a particular development.
The city has a whole zoning code, and the zoning code, of course, has to comply with state statutes on this topic as well. So if a new business or a retail project of some sort wants to come into St. Louis Park, their application needs to be evaluated as to whether they meet zoning code requirements. For example, how far away is the building to be located from other buildings or from property lines? How tall is the building? We are not allowed to evaluate any application based on the political or religious beliefs of the owner of the business. That is a personal decision for that owner, and so it has no place in our decision making. I would add to that, any business coming into St. Louis Park has to also comply, for example, with building codes and other infrastructure requirements. But those are applicable uniformly to all businesses. We don't pick and choose.
Okay, now, one time I was at several times I've been at a city council meeting, but on one particular time, there was something about a liquor stores going on, and one council member was against allowing the liquor warehouse to go in because he said, it's too big, it's going to, whatever. And we have too many liquor stores, and I kind of think that, but I don't drink, so, but anyway, the council did agree that the liquor warehouse could be built and all of that, and I don't remember exactly what you said about it, but evidently this was something where they met the zoning code, so you couldn't refuse them, or what was the deal?
Whether it's a liquor store or any other kind of store, they have to comply with the existing zoning requirements. Legally, you cannot make new requirements and then try to retroactively apply them to anybody. And so I think I remember what you were talking about, and that liquor store indeed did meet the zoning requirements. So at that point, it frankly does not matter whether I or any other city council member thinks it's too big, because the standard is set by the zoning code, and therefore they complied. If we want to change the requirements going forward, we can do that. But that's for future applications. It would not affect an application coming in right now.
Okay, thank you.
So along those same lines, I'm thinking, so if a sex shop comes in, the request for a sex store, or, you know, like a sex world or something coming, any of the, you know, would you be able to, just based on the zoning, be able to turn them down? How would that particular type of place be influenced?
Well, as a matter of fact, we do already have in our zoning code a provision that allows, and I quote, sexually oriented businesses, unquote, to locate within St. Louis Park within certain parameters. Like, as I recall, I don't have it in front of me, but as I recall, it can't be too close to a school. And so if they meet the zoning code, they can comply. We actually did look at this question a number of years ago, and we are not allowed to just flat out prohibit them.
Okay. Really?
Really. That's a First Amendment issue.
Thank you.
Considering the amount of time it takes, if a woman decides to run, how much time are you able to give them and help them learn all of these ins and outs?
In my opinion, it is the responsibility of not only me, but any city council person to help other new council members. So yes, I can help and will help someone who is running for office or is elected to office. In my view, and I've talked about this with other council members, any new council member, myself included, it takes at least 6 months of a steep learning curve to learn. You know, what do we know before we were elected about traffic engineering or building code requirements or whatever? So it is our job, I think, and our responsibility to help each other learn more about what the ordinances are, what the policies are, who do you call if you have this question or that question, that sort of thing. So yes, I am prepared to do that.
Barb, did you have a question?
Well, I do. Sorry, I'm full of questions here today. But in my ward, in Ward 4, I would love to see a woman get involved in that area, you know, in my area, to represent more people. But I know it's really hard to find candidates to do that. How can we find more women that are interested in running? Because I feel like our representative is not really...
You'd like him replaced.
I would like him replaced, yes. And I'm not going to do that, but I'd like to find a younger woman. Is there, I mean, I know that Women Winning or some of those, are there organizations that are really scouring the areas for women to run as candidates? I mean, there's an effort out there, isn't there, Sue? Yeah.
The city council seats for wards 1, 2, 3, and 4 are all up this November. Yes, there are organizations that help. There is one particular one called the Women Candidate Development Coalition, and that is a nonprofit that has been around for many years, and their job is go around statewide, help encourage and find women who will run for office, whether that's city council, legislature, whatever, and help connect them to other women or other people really, who will help them, teach them what to do. Women Winning also helps with the White House Project. There actually are training programs for women on how to run for office, what you need to know, whether it's with the finances or the volunteering or the public speaking or whatever. I myself participated in 2 of those long before I ran for office the first time, and I found them very valuable.
As you know, the League of Women Voters is in favor of ranked choice voting. What do you think its chances of passage in St. Louis Park are within, say, the next year?
Well, I also support ranked choice voting. And the City Council is going to have a study session discussion on that very topic. I don't know the exact date right now, but I know that it's coming up in the next month or two, something like that. You're all welcome to come and observe that discussion. I don't know what the outcome of that discussion will be. I can say that the City Council has discussed that ranked choice voting option in the past several years, and previously the majority of the council members were not in favor of it, and in part several years ago there was frankly a technical problem that it was hard. There weren't the machines that read the ballots weren't apparently equipped to read ranked choice voting ballots very well. My understanding is that that technical problem has been solved, and they have in fact now done ranked choice voting successfully in Minneapolis, and if they can do it with 35 candidates on the mayor ballot, then I think we should be able to do it in St. Louis Park. Yes. If we did it, it would not go into effect this year. It would have to be at least, well, we have city elections in odd number of years, so I assume it would be in effect then for 2019. There is still one other potential issue that I know may cause some people to be concerned, which is that while city governments have the right to adopt ranked choice voting, school boards do not. I personally think that law should be changed, but I'm not sure anybody cares what I think about that. So if we were to do this, and school boards have their elections on odd number of years as well, we would have, on one ballot, we would have ranked choice voting for city council members and the current traditional balloting form for school board members. And I think there is some question about whether this would be confusing to residents as they come to vote. I don't know that it should be, but some residents may find that to be a challenge. And so if we adopt ranked choice voting, I think we will also need to develop some kind of education program to educate the voting public about what this means.
Excuse me, Sue, but as Minneapolis also had the same scenario where they have school board members on the same ballot with council or with their city offices, I believe. Is that true?
I think that's right. Well, actually, I'm not 100% sure that's right.
I think I heard that, and so they did say, I was talking to Jean Massey, Fair Vote, and she said the one thing that they had to do was run the ballots through twice, possibly once to count the ranked choice votes, and then a second time to count the school board votes. But so, but you will let us know when that study session is?
I can. I don't know what it is today, though.
You're my council person, and I personally know that you take all of your duties very responsible, that you're a dedicated council person, and that you're a very visible council person, that you've come to our annual neighborhood party and talked and walked around, talked among all of the people, and believe me, I've heard them complain at you at that party and things like that. And I really appreciated you being my council person. And one personal thing, we had a construction project on my street, and it stalled for some reason, and it for a long time, and it really became an eyesore. And I complained to Sue, and I don't know if she had anything to do with it, but within days, that thing started up again, and it was going in, and now it's a lovely home. But I want you to know that I appreciate it, and I feel the council is going to be poor for your absence.
Well, thank you, Judy.
Any final questions for Sue? Then just one more thank you, Sue, and I appreciate your being a member of the League of Women Voters, and I hope you enjoy all the extra time that you will have. Thank you very much.
Thank you.